With a private lounge and promenade, a full restaurant and kitchen, and sleeping cots, the Nautica Aerospace Albatross is the last letter in luxury. Not quite as fast as a modern airliner per se, but you get to fly there in nothing short of complete style and luxury in this flying boat. In the procedural world of Flyout, there is a lot of water. It covers about 70% of the world, similar to Earth. Different from Earth, however, the Flyout world is mostly comprised of small islands and much of its land is fractured Arctic wasteland or desert. What little does remain of the habitable and temperate zones on the Flyout world are mostly smaller islands, save for a few major mainland areas. This, in a way, opens up a possibility that was forgotten by time in our world and our history. Of course, I am referring to the future of flying boats. You see, in the early ages of commercial aviation, there was a distinct lack of runways for aircraft to land at. Most cities, ports, or even major landmasses needed suitable landing fields for large commercial aircraft. Because of that, this time period saw many futuristic visionaries seeing flying boats as the future of air travel. Bigger, more luxurious, and with far more landing options, there were very few downsides to the flying boat design philosophy. Unfortunately, due to improved aircraft infrastructure as well as the advancement of transonic jet-powered airliners, this future never really became a reality. But what about the Flyout world? As mentioned before, the Flyout world's habitable zones and presumably major commerce zones are made up almost exclusively of islands, archipelagos, and other landmasses almost completely surrounded by water. So this video, with a 0.207 update bringing water physics to Flyout, the question is this: can flying boat airliners work? Let's jump into it. Hey guys, it's Messier82 and today we are going to be making a flying boat airliner. Apologies for my voice, I am a little bit sick, but I just can't put off this voiceover any longer, so therefore I'm just gonna power through it. I've got my tea and coffee and all that junk, and hopefully my voice sounds okay. So this is our flying boat, the Nautica Aerospace Albatross. Made up the name and company of course, but let's look at some stats on this aircraft. Spanning over 45 meters long and 52 meters wide, the Albatross was a bit of a naval Goliath. Its cruising speed of just below Mach 0.6 wasn't particularly fast compared to the modern airliner, but it allowed for relatively fast long-range flight over vast swatches of land or sea. So what exactly makes the Albatross so luxurious? Well, let's look at what went into my design. The first thing is the 4 turboprop engines powering this aircraft. The turboprops allowed for far smoother flight than their piston-powered counterparts, while still allowing for better takeoff weight and low-end thrust than a traditional turbojet. This combined with a pressurized cabin allowed my Albatross to fly above the weather per se, or simply in the jet stream. This means far smoother flight as well as more comfortable conditions inside the aircraft. The only real downside to this turboprop and pressurized cab setup would be, of course, the noise. She would not be a quiet aircraft, so we added some extra weight to the vehicle to simulate the insulation needed in the walls. Plus, if it's a little bit too loud, I'm sure we can offer our passengers earmuffs or earplugs to sleep on board the aircraft. The engines were also mounted relatively far down the wings. This, combined with a water rudder, allowed the aircraft to effectively turn in the water with ease. To ensure control of the aircraft was maintained even under a double engine failure on one side, a large H-tail style rudder was added to the aircraft. This guaranteed that even under the most critical conditions, the aircraft would remain under control and in the air. The underside of this vehicle was also designed as, a boat. A large chine ran from the front of the aircraft to the rear planing section. The chine is sort of a V-hull shape that is designed to not only increase stability but also reduce the impact of the waves. Essentially, it does this by breaking the surface tension as quickly as possible with that sharp tip. This is why the front of many boats and flying boats have a characteristic sharp line down the middle. This not only increases naval stability but also makes landings and takeoffs a lot less harsh on both the passengers and the airframe. Moving past the nose, a moderately sized planing surface was included in the middle and towards the rear of the aircraft. These surfaces, along with the general shape of the nose chine, allowed the ship to rise up and out of the water at high speeds. This is crucial to a flying boat, as planing along the surface of the water significantly reduces drag and is one of the only reasons such a vehicle can lift out of the water in the first place. Unfortunately, this isn't quite the case in Flyout at the moment, as water physics are very early in development. They've just been implemented and they are a crude version of what it could be in the future. Moving on, the aircraft was also meant to travel at higher speeds of about Mach 0.6 to 0.7, so some critical Mach number reduction was required along the fuselage. This is why the wings sweep back slightly. To further reduce drag, a semi-streamlined cockpit was included, as well as retractable pontoons that rested at the wingtips. As for the power plant of the aircraft, 4 turbojet engines with can combustors were connected via a power turbine and a gearbox to a contraprop setup ahead of the turbines. These powerful turboprops generated over 30 kilonewtons of thrust each and barely burnt any fuel while doing so. To prevent the engines from taking on any water, the intakes were placed above the nacelle. This, combined with the gull-wing structure of the main wings, kept the props and intakes far above sea level, making for a minimal chance of any water to be ingested by the intakes. The large H-tail structure was also elevated far above the surface of the water to prevent any tail shakes, but I unfortunately failed, as seen a little bit later in the video. It gets changed later, don't worry. This is because buoyancy at the moment is a little bit weird in Flyout. There are no wakes, there is no planing unless specifically done with wings, and as mentioned before, it's a very crude version of what it could be. To achieve any buoyancy, the bottom of the aircraft contained a large, empty, invisible drop tank. This essentially just told the game that there was supposed to be a buoyant portion of the aircraft here. For stability, a drop tank also had to be hidden within each pontoon. As for the remainder of the exterior and the general styling of the aircraft, I was heavily inspired by Saunders Roe flying boats of the period and generally modeled the interior off of my impression of the Princess. The exterior was mildly inspired by the Queen as well as a few other aircraft, but far smaller. Luckily enough, I was lent a few files and images about the Queen from Rex's hangar. Huge thank you to him and his channel, and if you're interested in some unique historical aviation content, I'd highly recommend checking him out. And in the future, now that I have some of these images, I may attempt a replica of the Queen if JagJig doesn't beat me to it first. Tell me what you think of that in the comments below. While it may have been inspired by all of these aircraft mentioned though, the Albatross had its own unique style to it, which is very important to me because I try my best to design unique aircraft. So with at least the basics of the interior created, it was time to move to the windows, which is a very painful part of this build. This was just about the most time-consuming part of this. For each window you see on the aircraft, I had to manually set resolutions, add fuselage segments, and modify the vertices of the fuselage to give them a flush and relatively clean look. Just the main hull alone involved over 56 segments and over 2,000 vertices, most of which were manually adjusted in some way or another. On top of that, my original design got corrupted and I was not able to recover the file, so there was a point where I had to basically redo the entire aircraft, although luckily enough this variant is turning out far better than the original one. But in case you are wondering why this video took me so long to produce, the thousands of manually edited vertices as well as having to redo the aircraft is a very large factor in this on top of everything else that's going on in life. Now that I have covered the windows, it was time to move to the interior. The interior, similar to the exterior, was a set of inverted fuselage pieces designed to mimic the shape of the hull. This allowed me to design the interior space as well as the 2 floors on board the aircraft. Let's take a look at this cutaway of the interior I made while designing the aircraft. Moving from front to back, the aircraft starts on the bottom floor with the entryway and luggage hold. From here we move to the economy class seating, and then finally the beds in the back. Behind that there is a bathroom and a staircase. Starting at the front and top of the aircraft, we start with the cockpit. From there we move on to the economy class restaurant and bar aboard the ship. A little bit crowded, but that's alright. From there on out, we have the kitchen in the middle under the wings to take advantage of the one segment of this aircraft that lacks windows. This of course is where food and drinks are stored and cooked. Moving back from there, we have the first class lounge. Designed for 2 to 6 VIP guests, the first class lounge was entirely sectioned off part of the ship with a gorgeous observation deck, beds, and lastly a private table with direct access to the bar and kitchen. No reason to travel all the way to the restaurant with your order when you have your own private table, right? Anyways, with the incredibly unique design of the Nautica Aerospace Albatross complete, as well as a full interior, full cockpit, and a full kitchen, lounge, cabin, restaurant, and beds, it was just about time to fly out. But first, we're going to have Live Messier take a look at the full internals with you guys, as you can't really see it in flight. Take it away, Live Messier. Alright, hello everyone. Before we get to flying, actually, this is Live Messier, not time-lapse Messier or anything like that, or voiceover Messier, any of those crazy characters you often see on my channel. I just wanted to go through and explain more or less all the compartments in the aircraft, because this thing has a lot of interior and it's kind of difficult to see it in flight, especially with the shading and the moving of the aircraft and all that. So we're just going to show you it right here. Alright, there we go. So essentially, we're going to start with the cockpit. Obviously, this part we can see in flight, so I don't care about it that much. Pretty simple, relatively dated cockpit design, including lots and lots of gauges, fuel selectors, radio, lights, everything you could need to fly an aircraft. And autopilot, of course, because I don't think anyone's going to be controlling this thing for 26 hours straight. Moving back, we have the economy class restaurant. So basically, the whole top floor of this aircraft is sort of unconventional on this aircraft. It doesn't really have any conventional seating. You have the restaurant, and then as you move into here, you have a rather incomplete, admittedly, kitchen, where they cook stuff and serve you hot meals on this flight, since it's supposed to be used for international flights, of course. With a range of what, like 10,000 miles, it would make sense. Anyways, you go down here and you get the economy seating. Theoretically, if I wanted this thing to have a seriously overbloated file size and I didn't really care about, modeling it, I would probably give them all their own individual little cubicles, or probably maybe put 2 rows of seats here too, just for the sake of, making it more luxurious. After all, this is a luxury aircraft, even in the economy seating. Moving back, you get the beds. Obviously, this thing's going to be in the air for quite a long time, so people are going to need to sleep. Therefore, we have beds. We have also sort of a storage room in the front, where you can probably change bed sheets, do all that stuff in flight without needing to land. As we move back, we have a staircase, but more importantly, we have a bathroom. Obviously, you're going to need a bathroom on this thing in flight. Inside, let's not look any further, so that way YouTube doesn't demonetize me here. Anyways, moving up the stairs, we have the first class lounge area. So basically, that's the point of these little pods on the side. I think I explained that is that they're more or less viewing pods for a sort of promenade deck. But this isn't actually a promenade deck. The economy class isn't really meant to be up here. This is for first class. So we have this beautiful cherry wood floor and rests. We have the beds. We have this nice seating area with, obviously a gorgeous view of the world outside. And then coming up here, we have a table. And this is basically where you're going to dine. It's a little bit cramped in the headroom. Hope that's okay with them. And more importantly, you have direct access to the kitchen, so the kitchen staff can immediately give you your food, talk to you, or, give you drinks from the bar, whatever you may choose. And that about concludes the inside of this thing. So now we're going to go on a short little flight. Take it away, time-lapse Messier. You've always seemed like the more adventurous type to me. Have you ever been so excited as to just go and explore the world? Well, about 70% of that world is water. So go on, make the world your playground today with the Nautica Aerospace Albatross. Featuring the latest in turboprop technology, our range of over 10,000 miles is sure to get you to even the most remote destinations. So go out and brave this treacherous world with no less than the comfort of a hotel room. Our full sleeping arrangements, restaurant, and bar is sure to make every customer feel nothing short of warmth and welcome. From the vast sweeping equatorial desert to the beauty and cold of the southern shores, book your flight with Nautica Aerospace today. The world is your oyster, and we'll help you open it. And once again, folks, a thank you to Alexandros on my Discord server for, letting me use that song. I really do appreciate it. It's a lot easier than using some of the other royalty-free music, so I appreciate it. Anyways, this is our flight. It's a pretty simple flight. We're on the southern coast of the Flyout world right now. I guess it would be the southwestern coast, I believe. Head down south another, I don't know, couple thousand miles, and you're going to be pretty far into the Arctic Circle, or rather Antarctic Circle. So we are just flying a little bit northwest here. And if anyone remembers my 1,000 miles on 10 gallons video, we're more or less trying to find the same location. Except this time we're going to be landing on the shoreline, and maybe I'll be setting an airport there. As mentioned before, for this flight, A, I messed up the buoyancy with the drop tank, and B, I messed up the H-tail and I made the bottom portion a little bit too long. So I do end up tail striking just a little bit on landing, but that's about all the problem we have. Otherwise, we just get to watch this very time-lapse flight of me moving over there, and it's pretty interesting to see like the weather and the wind and how it affects the vehicle under a time-lapse, because it's a lot more apparent here. Again, Stone did a great job with that. At right about this time, we should be starting our descent. I couldn't exactly see where I was going because of the clouds. I didn't have a GPS or know exactly where I was or anything, but I kind of just judged based on the geography that I'd be landing by the shore when I was entering below the clouds, and luckily enough, I was correct. So now you guys will watch me start to gear up for landing here. On approach, we're going to do what's called a soft field landing. Typically you approach these with a little bit more speed, and the goal is to sink into the ground or the water as little as possible. So you get yourself nice and close, you put in however much flaps you need to generate the appropriate amount of drag. Here it doesn't really matter how much flaps we put in, just a little bit was fine, but I ended up going full because I didn't want to overrun our little patch of water here. Of course, I'd rather be short than long, especially in a water landing. On an airfield landing, not so much, but here, absolutely. So we come in, we get nice and close to the ground, and we level out with our first flare. When we do our second flare, though, we hold our nose nice and high up in the air in order to touch down in the water as gently as possible. And after we touch down, we try and keep that nose in the air as high as possible to avoid the front end from sinking into the water. Because if that front end sinks in, you're going to generate a ton of drag, and that's going to be a huge problem. It could damage the airframe, you could nose strike. In this design, you wouldn't really nose strike, it probably wouldn't be a problem, but it's still good measure to keep that tail, or that nose up in the air while you're coming to a stop here. And of course, after that, we just shut off our engines, and that is it for the flight. So thank you guys for watching, I hope to see you all in the next one. This will be my last video before Flyout releases. I've got 3 other videos on burner right now. I'm a bit of a mess. But I hope you enjoyed. See you all in the next one, and goodbye.